All right, I'm recording and I'm with Faye. Faye, you've been on the podcast before. Update everybody on where you are with your writing.
So I finished as much as I could do on the first story, and it's the first story I've ever completely finished a draft of. So it was huge, and I have learned a ton writing it. I don't know if it will move any further down the line, but I'm happy with how much I got done and how much I learned. And so, yeah, now it's time for something new.
Nice. That's great. And it's with beta readers right now. Or have you
Yeah.
gotten all the beta readers but one back?
No, I haven't gotten any back yet.
Okay. All right. So it's with beta readers right now.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's a terrifying time and a wonderful time to start something new. Those are both an appropriate time to start something new.
So,
Um, okay, so you sent me a voice sheet with a ton of voices. You sent me your premise and you sent me a scene.
mhm.
I have some thoughts, but I don't just want to start like throwing things at you. The goal today is to get you writing. Is that the
Yeah.
goal? What's the goal
Yep.
today?
Yep. Come up with a way to move forward with it.
Come up with a way to move forward. What do you okay. Where are you feeling stuck? What are you nervous about before I just start throwing things at you?
I'm just I don't remember how I got started last time.
Okay.
And I'm kind of like I've got some ideas for scenes, but I know they're not right. Like I know they're not anything that would ever be useful to the story.
Gotcha.
And so I want to try and come up with things I can work on that will be useful to the character and to the plot rather
Okay.
than writing a bunch of backstory
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Let's bring up your premise. You have you have a couple different types of story going here,
mhm.
and there's a couple different ways to attack this. So, this is the premise you sent me.
Yep.
So let's talk through it and then let's talk through your characters. I think the best way, knowing you as a writer, I think the best way to get you writing is, like you're saying, to get you some scenes that you can start digging into. Does
Yep.
that make sense?
Yep.
So, in the basic premise, which I love, actually, let's do it this way. Tell me this, you know this. You don't need me to read this. Tell me this in your own words. What are you thinking? Give me the premise of the story.
So the in a nutshell, this is an adult woman who is at a point in her life where she thinks things are going to be changing one way, and her estranged father comes back into her life and puts everything on its head and actually moves her forward in her own self-worth.
Okay. And the way her estranged father comes back into her life is he and her son run away on a road trip together.
They steal her car.
They
Yep.
steal her car.
Yeah.
So now you have her joining them, finding them,
Yep.
joining them on the road trip, learning a ton of stuff about them while she's on the road trip.
Mhm.
Um, how does and I want to play with that some.
Okay.
This is a great premise for a story, by the way. Is Northern, so they're going, the father wants to go to all of the sites of
Yep.
this racehorse, the
Yep.
major historical sites of this racehorse, Northern Dancer. Is that a real horse? Is that a real thing?
That is the most famous racehorse in Canada.
Okay.
So he's historically quite important.
Okay.
But he also won the Kentucky Derby.
Okay. So we are
Um,
we are writing historical fiction.
yep.
You are writing a story about. So in this premise, so here's where I'm sorry, I'm trying to
That's okay.
figure out how to come at this, Faye, without just being like, "Blah!" Um, So you gave me all of these characters. Great job on your character voice chart, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You gave me all these characters. Um, Philippa is the mom.
You can delete the or hide the photos if you want,
I
but
love it. It's great.
oh, okay.
Philippa, I love the photos. Philippa is the mom.
Yep.
Sawyer is the
The
son.
son.
Philip is the father.
Yep.
Who is Dean?
That's her husband.
Okay. Currently married or a stepfather to Sawyer, I read.
Sawyer's father.
Sawyer's father. They're married, but in the middle of the book, she's going to find out they're getting a divorce.
Yep. Well, she's gonna find out he's cheating on her. Yeah.
He's cheating on her. Okay. Who's Mona?
Mona is her mother.
Mona is her mother. How does Mona play into this story? Where's Mona at in your mind?
Um, so Mona is the mother who can never be matched. She's done everything. She's a powerhouse, and Liz can never live up to her.
Okay.
Mona was left by Philip when Liz was really young,
Gotcha.
and then Philip went on to have another family.
Okay. Mona's still alive, Mona dead.
Mona's alive. Mona's gonna be a bit of an anchor and a kind of a hazard character.
Okay. Who's Alex?
Alex, this is someone who comes in way on the trip, but this is the veterinarian that she meets on the trip, and they bond over a dog that needs help.
Okay. So Alex is appearing on the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like the only road character I kind of have figured out yet.
Gotcha. So the reason I ask who all these characters are is because you really only need three for this story.
Okay.
You really only need Philippa Sawyer and Philip.
Mhm.
What the genre you're falling into in his book Anatomy of Genre, John Trudy calls myth. And the idea behind myth, road trip novels typically fall into this place. The idea behind myth is that characters think their life is one thing. They go on a journey. At each stage of the journey, they encounter issues. As they encounter those issues, they learn that their life is actually something else completely. Really good journey narratives. Every character on the journey is on the journey, whether they know it or not, out of a sense of desperation. That like they are kind of lost and they're going to find themselves as they travel, right? This is like Field of Dreams is a journey novel. He's got to go find, you know, first he's got to understand the voice in his head. Then he has to go find the old 60s writer. Then he has to go find, they have to go to a ballpark. Then they have to go find Doc Graham. Then they have to, well, first he has to build the field. Then he has to go do all these things. And then he comes home and he figures out that this is actually a journey to repairing the relationship with his father. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, how do you feel about that writing in that genre? Is that what you're looking to do? Does that excite you? Does that make you nervous?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like I see this like she has to go on the road trip with her father. And so part of the other characters are just ways to get her where she has no choice but to go. Um, but I don't know if just she and her dad on the road are enough unless they meet a lot of like along their stops, right?
I would bring Sawyer as well.
Okay.
She and her dad and Sawyer on the road. Um, so there's two ways to think about the story. One way is like well, sorry, there's not two ways to think about the story. There's ways to break down the story. One thing you need to break down is like you got to think of it in three halves. There's the world before the journey. There's all the steps in the journey. And then there's the world after the journey. And while they're on the journey, new information is revealed in each scene that forces them, they meet a challenge at each scene. So, you know, world before the journey is about showing the discrepancy between what they want their lives to be and what their life is. And then the world after the journey is showing the new them in their old life and how that makes life better. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you can almost think of it like this, where you've got your three characters, Liz, Sawyer, and Philip. Who does Liz think Liz is before the journey? Who does Liz think Sawyer is before the journey? And who does Liz think Philip is before the journey? Who does Liz learn Liz is in the journey? Who does Liz learn Sawyer is in the journey? And who does Liz learn Philip is in the journey? And then you have to do that for all three of them.
Okay.
Because if you've got three of them on this journey, who does Sawyer think Liz is? Who does Sawyer think Sawyer is? Who does Sawyer think Philip is? Who does Sawyer learn Liz is? Who does Sawyer learn Sawyer is? Who does Sawyer learn Philip is? And then Philip is the same. So you can see that, like, in this, you've got 18 solid scenes built in here. You've got a scene where you get Liz's perspective on Liz, which is kind of the scene you started to send me. Is the opening is kind of Liz's perspective on Liz's perspective on Liz's life. A scene where we learn Liz talks about with Sawyer about who Sawyer is. In that scene where Liz talks to Sawyer who Sawyer is, Sawyer's also going to talk to Liz about who Sawyer is. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you've got these three characters that you can mix and match in these scenes to have these different conversations. Are you tracking with me at all?
Yep. Yep. You get it.
So I think I think if I were approaching this book, I would what I would do is I would think about how do they each think of each other? And then you need a series of conversations on the journey in which they talk about how they think about each other. And then you need some major information dropped on the journey. And you have that stuff in here. You have that Sawyer is actually failing out of school. You have that Liz's husband is cheating on her. I think there was another big reveal too, wasn't there?
Um, she loses the big promotion that she was promised.
She's not getting the promotion at work that she
Yeah.
thought. Does the dad have any big reveal?
I guess the fact that he wants to go on the journey because he's dying.
Okay. That's it. And that's like the classic trope of like
Yeah.
the dad doesn't want to tell anybody that he's dying. So he's doing this thing to kind of racing away from death.
Yeah. And the whole thing about the horse is his thing because this is the one that got away, kind of.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So are you starting to kind of feel that structure a little bit? Do you want to hit that more? Like, how does that feel?
yeah. I just yeah, because that's one thing I was and originally I had set it up so that just Liz and Philip went on the road trip, but I know they need someone else on the road trip with them. So Sawyer would work, but then I'd have to rejig her reason for going.
Yeah, I think the other way would be for Liz and Donnie to go. I think the thing is the question is like who's on the road trip are the characters that are really going to be a part of the story. Because
Hmm.
what you're going to do is you're going to take these conversations about who I was, who I think I am, and who I actually am, and you're going to layer them over top of these scenes of places. So around the story of Northern Dancer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is what Field of Dreams does. So, and I think that's a good, and I think that is a good parallel to kind of what you're writing. It's a character driven journey of self-understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and all of these characters, every character on the journey is coming to a place of self-understanding. So in Field of Dreams, you have, the three characters on a journey of self-understanding become Ray, who's building the baseball field in his backyard, the old activist writer who's learning about himself, and then this guy Doc Graham, who's also coming to an understanding. I would put him as a side character. It's really Ray and well, in the book he's more, yeah, I'd put him on a journey. So you've got these three guys on a journey. They're all learning. The goal of the journey is for them to come to self-understanding about who they are.
Hmm.
Right? Ray has to come to terms with his past and with his father. The writer, whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, has to come to terms with what the world is. And then Doc Grimm has to be satisfied with the fact that the choices that he made to leave baseball, have this last moment in baseball. Baseball becomes the uniting thing that teaches them lessons.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, in order to use Northern Dancer's story to teach them lessons, they each need a lesson to learn. And then, so that's why I'm saying, like, figure out the lessons they're going to learn first. Then you can pace out their journey. And as they discover things about Northern Dancer, they discover things about themselves.
Okay.
In the same way and that's why I'm saying you really know every other character besides these three is going to end up being peripheral characters.
Hmm.
So, like, Ray has a wife. She's really just his sounding board. She's his anchor. She encourages him to go out and do things. You know, there's the baseball players on the field. They're really just kind of Ray's anchors. Like, they just, they push him in different ways and pull him in different ways. Um, so these other characters, like the mom and the brother, they're just going to end up being these side characters that don't necessarily have a change journey. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Which is why I'm pushing you to focus on the three that move through.
Okay.
If you just want to have two, you're going to have a lot of conversations between Liz and Philip.
Yeah.
Adding a third character on the journey allows you to break those up and gives you some combo conversations, like Philip and Sawyer, Liz and Sawyer, Liz and Philip, and then Philip, Liz, and Sawyer as a unit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 I definitely think I need somebody else to go on the road with them, but I'm having a hard time fitting Sawyer in.
The
But
reason I'm fitting Sawyer in is because he has a big reveal.
right.
Everybody on the road has to have a big moment where they're like, you think my life is this, but my life is actually this. So, like, Sawyer's moment that you've written on the premise is, you think I'm going to school on this athletic scholarship. I'm actually failing out, and I don't even know if I want that. Right? I'm stuck in this plan that you and Dad have for me. Right? Liz's reveal is, I think that if I just keep pushing through, life is finally going to be okay. My husband's cheating on me. This is my new life. What do I need to learn about myself through this? Like, what do I need to learn, come to understand about myself and my life through this big reveal? The father has this, like, I'm just slowly dying away and I've screwed up my life, to I'm dying and I'm trying to fix things with this road trip. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other options for you to put on this road trip, Donnie, you have him housebound right now.
Yeah.
Liz, Donnie, and her dad going on a road trip makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, then you get a big kind of family combination there where they're dealing a lot with their past, who they were to each other.
Hmm.
Um, what's nice about having Sawyer on the road trip is it's not all about the past. Some of it's about the future.
Yeah.
What's when you put Donnie on the road trip, now it's a lot about them processing their past.
Yeah.
Liz and her father are going to be processing their past.
Yeah.
Liz and her son are going to be processing his future and her role in that future. That gives you a nice parallel there between Liz the child and Liz the parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You put Donnie in there, and now you have Liz the sibling and Liz the child, but you don't really get Liz the parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. If I want her to be a mother, I gotta.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm, is it possible to set up like Sawyer's girlfriend ends up with them somehow?
100%. You can do whatever you like. Faye, anything's possible. Anything's possible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that like a young woman would be a really interesting counterpoint to them, right? Because
Yeah.
Philip wants to go with Sawyer, but Liz doesn't want Sawyer to go. She wants him to stay home.
Yeah. Whoever starts the run, like whoever starts the journey, Liz is a reluctant journey member. So let's take Liz out for a second. Whoever starts the journey is running away from things.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In the way that you've constructed this journey. Whoever starts the whoever starts the vacation is running away from things.
Yeah.
So Sawyer's a good fit to be running away from things. And it makes sense that he'd bring his girlfriend with him
Yeah.
because they're running away together. Um, having four characters on the road trip also isn't a bad idea. It's a good, yeah, it again gives you more combos, gives you Liz talking to a younger woman, gives you.
That's one thing I noticed when I was putting the pictures in. I was like, oh, there's only two women.
That's really funny. There's only two women, and you're likely not going to see Mona very much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no like female,
Yeah.
interaction. I was like, well, that's kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the name of the Bechtel test? Is that the name of the test where are there any scenes where two women talk to each other and not have a conversation about a man? Um, your book would fail that. So so yeah, I think so if you can reconstruct the story in your mind,
Mhm.
I think you're gonna line up better with like character change plots. So if
Okay.
you reconstruct the story in your mind to be like Sawyer and his girlfriend, you know, abduct the grandfather and run away and try to steal Liz's car. Liz catches up to them, once she finds out Sawyer's desperation for this, she decides to throw everything to the wind and go on the road trip. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you've got the road trip where they're experiencing Northern Dancers life, but really it's just isolating them to have time with each other.
Hmm.
They face different personal and external and internal conflicts on the road trip. And then at the end, they come home to a new life.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Yeah, that feels good. Yeah, the reason why I said it in the spring of 2011 is
Yeah.
actually that's the summer where Northern Dancer is buried at a farm in near Toronto, that was sold to sold to the city and then sold to a university. And in the spring of 2011, it was basically sitting in the weeds, like his headstone
Mm,
was, and that was the summer where they cleaned it up.
okay. How does that play into your story, do you think?
I there's an image in my head of the very last scene. I think the new site was opened in August or September of that year.
Okay.
And I have an image of, you know, probably two people standing at the gravestone
Okay.
when it's cleaned up. So that's kind of,
So do you have the image of these people standing at the gravestone when it's clean?
yeah, yeah.
Nice. Okay. Um, do you have a name yet for the girlfriend?
No, let's call her
Okay.
Tiffany.
Tiffany.
Let me make it something really hard for you to spell.
I know, I was about to say you're killing me. Um, yeah, so there's a couple ways we can go now to get you writing. We can write some plot beats. We can work on this idea of like understanding how they're each going to change.
Hmm.
Um, or we can work on personalities. Where do you want to fall?
How, when you looked at the character voice sheet, do you think I've kind of got that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's go through the character
Okay.
voice sheet. I think your voices are great. I think
Okay.
they're really good. I think you're gonna remember that like these are starting places for voices, and
Yeah.
as you write, they might change. The places where I was focused on when I was reading it are your internal, external goals, your Enneagram, and your character notes.
Yep.
And again, I think these side characters, Dean, Mona, Alex, Donnie, they're going to become less important.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So yeah, let's look at Liz real quick. I like that you have her as an Enneagram 2. She wants to help. I think that's really there's a good, I think, conflict there in that she really wants to be loved and appreciated and is looking for ways. And so in that way, she's kind of becoming the glue. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Um, I think that's really smart and solid. And I think your voice for her, like the apparently it seems at times using those for words and other hedging words or phrases, the being self-conscious, uh, I think this is all a solid character.
Okay.
Um, I are you just writing through her eyes?
Um, so far, yeah.
Okay.
That's how I'm gonna start it, yeah.
There's a couple different the problem with the issue you're gonna have with just writing through her eyes is she has to be in every conversation.
Oh yeah, shit.
It's not a bad thing. It's just she has to be in every scene.
Yeah, I
Another
think.
way to do it would to do co vehicles.
Hmm.
I would recommend her and Sawyer.
Okay.
Um, let's look at Sawyer. Uh, you have him as like this Enneagram 1, which is great because it gets that like black and white. There's right and wrong. There's the right way to do this and the wrong way to do this. And it brings a nice internal conflict for him because he feels like he's failing at the right way to do something. What's great about those Enneagram 1s is that inner critic, um, that really brings them uh, to places of internal conflict in which they constantly tell themselves they're failing. So I think that's good. The only place I would go a little bit different with his voice, you have him quick-witted and enjoying banner or quips for his cadence. I would bring a little more cynicism into him.
Okay.
Um, because he's dark, because he's struggling with who he is and his life choices,
So like more of an edge to him then?
I would give him more of an edge. I'd make him more of a pessimist than you have him. Um, it's going to give you a nice parallel to Liz, who wants to help him not be that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
She's, it gives a nice combination between the two of them where she can constantly be encouraging him and pushing him to like, hey, it's going to be a great day. Hey, it's going to be good. Hey, aren't you excited? Aren't you happy? Hey, isn't this going to be like, it's exciting, right? It's going to be good. And him having a more like the dramatic nature to what you're writing, right? You have him using big words, expects for his age, a strange mix of critical and idealistic. Um, and then this like this dramatic expressive face and his body language. Uh, I think if you just add in there a little bit of pessimism
Okay.
and cynicism, you get a kid that has an internal struggle. What'll be nice about that is that as you modulate to Sawyer at the end of the book, you can lose that darkness. Does that make sense? So as we
Yep.
think about demonstrating how Sawyer will change, you can lose that darkness of
Okay.
who he is. When you start thinking about how Liz is going to change, you know, her voice, she needs to move from the way you have the story designed. She needs to move from trying to help people be who she thinks they should be to actually helping people be who they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I had her sort of set up that instead of getting her self-worth from what she does to help others, she's going to become more self-confident just, you know,
Yeah,
based on
yeah.
herself.
Um, Having Mona as this like high power, having her mother as this like strong and driving character is a good anchor for her because the mother, like you've done a really great job here because the mother has this voice that is very uh sorry, I'm just lost for words today. Has this voice that's very expectant, right? Like the stiffness of her posture, how she's choosing words, it implies that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And so you can kind of see that weighing down on Mona and trying to, sorry, on Liz and trying to force Liz into making decisions about people that are right and wrong. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you've chosen a really great anchor here for Liz. Um, Philip is a good 7, right? Always cheerful, better phrases. And what's nice about taking Philip on the journey is that, 7s have that longing for freedom and they run away from pain. So using a 7 on a journey narrative is perfect. The hardest thing for a 7, for any 7 character, is to actually sit down and deal with the pain they're feeling.
Yep.
So having Philip with this careful, the words you're choosing always cheerful, joke phrases, better than the weather, it is what it is. Like that's all, you know, I'd avoid it is what it is, and I try to find another phrase there that's kind of chipper.
Okay.
It would make sense in the plot that Sawyer is drawn to Philip because Sawyer's looking for that carefree desire.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that works, that Philip is actually an engine for Sawyer and that Philip like pushes Sawyer in a positive way. Um, and it makes sense that Philip is an anchor for Liz because Liz really just wants him to like stop. Does that make sense? He's a
Yeah.
chaos engine.
Yeah.
She's trying to help everybody and keep everything together, and his chaos is like creating problems. Um, So I think he's a good combination too. I think the way you've got his cadence and pacing is good. I would make sure in his pacing he talks a lot.
Okay.
You need him telling stories.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I had it up there in notes on voice.
Yeah.
Really get to
Yeah.
simple answer, would rather tell a story.
Oh,
Um,
perfect. Yeah, you're right there. I didn't see that. Yeah, you're right in that. But yeah, and the storytelling for him needs to be a way of avoiding the moment.
okay.
Uh, storytelling, storytelling in characters takes a lot of different, like we do it for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of times people like the one you're describing here for Philip. um, Storytelling is a way to take the topic of conversations off of things they don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And it can be a preemptive defensive measure where they're very excited about telling stories. He's also great for this because he's the one that has the history with Northern Dancer. So he's going to be super excited and he's going to be the one telling them all about Northern Dancer as they go. Does that make sense? And Liz is going to be the one that doesn't want to hear about Northern Dancer. I think there's a nice dynamic here if you can play it where part of the reason that Liz goes along with this is because Sawyer is the kid she hopes he'll be when he's with Philip.
Okay.
He's optimistic, he's more positive, he smiles with Philip, whereas when he's alone, he's in his head and he's critical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you give Sawyer that kind of inner darkness where he seems unhappy all the time,
Okay.
and if he's happy with Philip, that gives you a reason for Liz to go, you know what, let's do this. Yeah. I would we can talk about plot in a minute. So let's talk about Tiffany because she's the character you don't have
Okay.
up
Now we
here.
have to add her. Yeah.
Do you have a thought for who Tiffany is in this?
Um, I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit. I think I want her to be a better student than Sawyer.
Okay.
Um, but looking for excitement, and so this road trip is like she's never done anything like this before, kind
Gotcha. I might put her at I might try to make her more whimsical. I might try to make her carefree. You want her to be an anchor to Liz and an engine to Sawyer in a way that's different. And Liz's story is going to be really like beautifully deep, Faye, because these people are only anchors to her when she's trying to apply her plan of things to them. When she becomes the best version of herself, they actually stop pulling her down. Does that make sense?
yeah,
So you want Tiffany to be an engine. And I actually earlier said you need to do this through Sawyer and Liz's eyes. I actually think you can do it all through Liz. I don't think you need to bring in Sawyer as we talk about it. Tiffany, especially if you have four people on the road trip, because that gives you more combinations for Liz to deal with than
Mhm.
just the two of them. But Tiffany needs to be, I would try to make her carefree. I would try to make her adventurous and whimsical. I'd make her like a 4 on the Enneagram, the creative, who um her biggest fear is being normal and
Okay.
being average. So she's constantly looking for ways to be unique and to be different. And so, her getting in a car with Philip and driving across the country makes perfect sense. That's exactly what she's going to do. Her having great grades also makes perfect sense. Like school can just come naturally to her. She can
Yeah.
just be naturally smart. So, and that's something that sets her apart. She doesn't want to be like everybody else's nerd. Does that make sense? She wants to
Yep.
be the more adventurous, whimsical one. She's The struggle Liz is going to have with her is that a lot of times fours don't like to be nailed down into a plan. So Liz wants to help Sawyer be who she thinks Sawyer could be. Tiffany doesn't want to make any plans. So there's that, like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's that contrast between those two voices in Sawyer's life. Yeah.
Yeah. Tiffany thinks this is the best family ever because look at what they're doing and
Uh,
look
Yeah.
at what
Why would we not? Yeah.
like think about the what I did on my summer vacation essay you could write.
Yeah. And you've got Liz the whole time being like, where are your parents? And Tiffany being like, they don't care. I can do whatever I want. Right. Like my parents are super chill. So it's that, yeah, I think there's again, every member of the party who's on the trip, you want to have some form of self-exploration. So I think with Tiffany, you're going to want her to have some kind of actual need. There's got to be a fear of moving forward. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
She's in very similar way, she's paralleling Philip. He's running away from death, she's running away from future.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, running away from life.
Okay. So we've got the characters,
Okay.
you've got the pattern of the journey. The next thing all great journey stories need is a clock.
Okay.
You need a time. There has to be something coming, something that has, maybe it's Sawyer's first day of university, maybe it's graduation, maybe it's like, the John Hughes movies, or the book we read, by John Green as the dialoguers, whose name I cannot remember right now. Prom is the looming thing, right? Like here comes prom. You need some kind of date.
What I'm thinking when you say that is that probably the underlying clock for Philip is that he knows he doesn't have long to live. Like
Yeah,
he wouldn't tell everybody that. But also for Liz, it'll be all these things and they keep missing the deadlines.
yeah. And I would say she needs to be, the time needs to be something that it's like, I'm okay to do this trip as long as we're back by this time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm okay to do this as long as we're back by X. Because she needs to allow herself to go on this trip with them. She needs to give her permission. She needs to give herself permission to go with the caveat of, as long as we're back for you, Sawyer, to do X thing, we
Mhm.
can go.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, how are you feeling about characters? Do you want to do more character combinations? Do you want to talk more about characters? Or do you want to go into like story beats?
Let's do story beats.
Okay. Let's pull up our whiteboard. So we've said we've got these three sections of your story. We've got um uh world before, we've got on the road, sorry, I'm moving things around as I'm doing this. And then we've got world after. um I could have done this beforehand, but I didn't know if you were gonna actually buy into the story, the road trip. So I was like, Faye may not go that way. Then I'm showing up with a whiteboard that's already made. And Faye's like, what are you talking about? So you've got these three sections of the stories. You've got these big reveals, right?
Yeah.
Liz learns her husband is cheating. Let's do these all from Liz's perspective because
Okay.
you seem pretty settled that you're writing in her.
I'm gonna start from her anyways, and
Okay.
we'll see how it goes.
Her husband's name again is Dean.
Dean.
Yeah. So Dean is cheating on me is one reveal. Dad is dying is a reveal. Sawyer is flunking out of school. Um, will probably lose scholarship is a reveal. Um,
Oh, lost the promotion at work.
lost the. Why does that happen?
Because she's just being led along by someone who she thinks is a friend. So
Okay.
she's doing a whole bunch of work and she's being promised this promotion, but there's no promotion really.
Okay. Um, so let's change that from lost to work is never going to promote me.
Okay.
That's another great trope in kind of character arcs is this idea that she's fighting for something that everyone else knows she's never going to get, but she hasn't woken up yet to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if you're thinking of kind of scenes that you already have planned, you need Liz. Liz learns dad is gone, which is the kind of the scene you sent me. Liz
Yep.
learns car was stolen. Liz figures out Sawyer and Tiffany stole car. Liz catches up uh, to them. So these are all, most of these are in this like middle ground of when between on the road and the world before.
Yeah.
Um, and they can each be fun kind of beats for you to play with, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
can actually put them in any order. She can figure out that her car was stolen first, and then
Mm-hmm.
she gets the call that her dad was gone, and she's like, I can't talk to you right now, Donnie. I'm dealing with the fact that car was stolen, and then she can figure out that Tiffany was in the car. Um, on the road, the journey starts when she catches up to them. Do you have any idea about how she's going to catch up to them?
Well, I think they're going to be at a police station because she's reported her car stolen.
I love it. That's perfect.
And either they had a fender bender because dad was driving, or they've been apprehended.
I love it. And this scene, there needs to be a debate between Liz and Sawyer. Does that make sense? I
Yep.
keep butchering his name, but you know what it is.
That's okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah, debate between Liz and Sawyer. So these all kind of exist in the like pre-road trip. Um, the question you're going to struggle with this one is why is Liz okay with it?
So does she get one of these? Like, does she find out that the promotion didn't come through, and that's the thing that kicks her? Like,
Yeah, you've got to have in here, she's got to have her like, you know what, fuck it moment. Her like, I'm going, let's go. I don't care.
I think it has to be the work thing.
You think it has to be the work thing?
Yeah.
It can be the work thing. It can also be I'm being cheated on. It
I
could
want,
be,
yeah, I want the Dean thing to come later because want her to have a flirtation with whether or not she sleeps with the veterinarian. So
gotcha. Why would that make this come later? Is she going to feel guilty about sleeping with the veterinarian?
there's a whole, yeah, there's a whole bunch of, or she just almost, or she decides to do it because her husband's cheating on her,
Okay.
you know?
If you want her to do it because her husband's cheating on her, put this here.
Okay.
If you want her to be tempted and not go through with it, but then learn that her husband is cheating on her, put this here.
Okay, do the tempting first. Okay.
Okay. Then I would go ahead and put this here. This happens in World Before
Okay.
because she needs to be at a place where she's like, my life is chaos and falling apart.
The new schedule comes out and she's supposed to be, in
Yeah.
a certain role, and instead they've given her extra hours again.
Yeah. Um, this you want somewhere in here, like not right away. This is you want to save this for a big climax moment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because Sawyer's going to be lying to her through this whole trip. And his big reveal is, look, I'm flunking out of school.
So does he tell her directly, or does Tiffany spill the beans?
That's up to you and in your writing and how you're working. I might have Tiffany. I think you get a great dramatic scene where he kind of explodes and forces her to react to it.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
also Tiffany could tell her earlier, and then she has to lie to Sawyer about not knowing. So they're lying to each other.
that's another way to do it. Yeah, it just kind of depends on how you want the story to feel.
Okay.
The way Tiffany telling her early, you have to deal with the betrayal between Sawyer and Tiffany after
Yeah,
that.
that's better to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, if Tiffany hints to it and is like, maybe he doesn't want that future.
Mhm.
And then you have her being like, you don't know what you're talking about. We've been working on this forever. Of course he wants this. We've put in all these, like, what do you mean he doesn't want that future? Of course he wants that future. All along the stages of the trip, and I might actually flip these then. All along the stages of the trip, you have her saying, like, nagging him about things he needs. Hey, when we get back, remember, you got to do this thing. When we get back, remember, you got to do this thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
That leads to that big explosion of, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
he could.
flunking out. I'm not going to graduate. Right. Like, yeah.
So if she sets the first time clock as we have to be back for graduation,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
then he just says, "I'm not graduating."
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great time clock of like, we need to be back for graduation. You're not missing your graduation. Um, it's also a nice time clock because if she's given up on work, right? If she's pretty much like, I quit, then she doesn't have any time pressure. And if you give them like a week and a half to 2 weeks, he doesn't until graduation. She can be like, well, we just have to be back for graduation because he wouldn't have anything really going on. As someone who just launched a high school senior, I could tell you there was nothing going on for her between between
Mhm.
graduation, between the end of high school and graduation. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So how are you feeling about these scenes so far?
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are kind of the big.
Okay. You can kind of feel the conversations you need to have a
Yeah.
little bit. At this point, after Liz agrees to go, this is where you start to put your Northern Dancer sites in,
Hmm.
right? Each thing is gonna, how many sites do you have them going to?
Um. Well, they're gonna have to go to the farm in Toronto because that's going to be the start and the end, because that's where he was born and that's where he's buried, of
Okay.
course. Um, and then down to Kentucky for the Derby, and then I think he was at a farm near Louisville, but I have to look it up more. But yeah, he stood at stud for like 15 years
Okay.
down there. So,
Okay.
and I have the farm name and stuff, and then back to Toronto.
Okay. Um, you said the farm in Toronto is was a mess and is cleaned up in 2011.
Yeah.
You may have them be the ones that clean it. Uh, there's a nice symbolism there of them cleaning their lives and the horse's life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and they could arrive at the beginning, kind of earlier in the summer, where it's a mess, and Dad starts trying to pull weeds and stuff, and
Hmm.
has a health issue. So
Yeah. But that's just or they could decide, here on the trip, let's go back and clean it up. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Um, so that so you've kind of got, and you can see with each one of these, you're gonna have a scene before at the place, a scene after, right? A scene
Mhm.
before at the place, a scene after, scene before at the place, scene after. So if you think of all of these as like 3 scenes
Mhm.
each, you can see that it gives you, and if you think of these as like conflict, meditation at the place, resolution, conflict, meditation, resolution, conflict, meditation, resolution. You can see that you have kind of 4 cycles of change here. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Are you following me there?
Yep.
Have you and I talked about the Tuckman cycle of change?
No.
It's actually the Tuckman cycle of group dynamics. So I'm going to encourage you to kind of think of these 4 moments in your story this way. Bruce Tuckman was a sociologist long, like back in the 50s, I think. Studied group dynamics and like how groups work together. And he broke it down into, in the end, there were 5 stages, but really only 3 of the stages matter for what we're talking about. Forming, sorry, no, storming, norming, and performing. So the idea is that people settle into expectations of each other and expectations of behavior. So if you're with a group of people, he was studying people on a nuclear submarine. And the idea is that like they all learn how to operate with each other. I talk to Billy in this way, I talk to Sarah in this way, they talk to me in this way. We have a general way of operating with one another. These are my expectations of how they're going to behave. These are their expectations of how I'm going to behave. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
That's your like norming phase. I know, or sorry, that's your performing phase. I'm performing out of expectations. At somewhere at the end of that performing phase comes a storm where all of the expectations are thrown into chaos. And after the storm, we renorm. So there's a period of like settled where we're rebuilding expectations. We're learning how to operate in new ways. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yep.
So, and then we perform out of that new relationship. So you can imagine this cycle for them. The conflict is the storm. So you have they're performing here. You add a storm. Let's say the first storm they add is like, hey, dad is dying. Right before they get to the farm in Toronto. Dad's dying. He reveals that to Liz in some way. It causes some kind of conflict or a fight. Meditation on it is the renorming. She has to recenter herself now that she understands dad is dying. And then post farm in Toronto, there's a new way of them living together. And then you get another storm. Sawyer's flunking out. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Then there's a renorming at the site where they're at the site and she's reflecting with Sawyer and they're kind of settling. And then there's a reestablishment of a new norm as they walk away from the Kentucky Derby together. Are you following kind of like how that? So you have a natural built-in cycle with all of these sites. Each one right before they come to the site, I'd reveal the conflict. I'd have a fight in the car. I'd have a yelling match in the gas station. I'd have a quiet, frustrated conversation on the side of the road. A tire breaks, and as they're changing the tire, they have this fight. They arrive at the farm in Toronto. You use the story of Northern Dancer to kind of ground them in their relationships with one another, and then give us a scene where they're leaving and they kind of make up and renorm into a new way of operating. Does that make
Yep.
sense? And you don't have to, these don't need to be your only, you don't just need like, you don't have to hold yourself to 12 scenes on the road. You can put other scenes in here. You have a vet she's going to meet, that's going to teach her something about herself. You have, so you have other places on the road that you can stop and go, but make sure you hit those three. You need a conflict that like shakes up expectations between people. I used to talk when I was doing a lot of group dynamics study. I used to talk about it shaking a snow globe. So all the snow's on the bottom of the snow globe. Everything's fine. Everybody thinks like, okay, we know what it is to live in this snow globe. And you grab the snow globe and you go, "Grr!" And all the snow goes everywhere. And the norming is everybody who lives in the snow globe running around being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then finally the snow settles and it's all in different places and things look different, but you're like, okay, okay, we can live here. We can live here.
Okay.
And then somebody takes the snow globe and goes, eh, and then shake it again, and then it all happens again. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you want that like snow globe around, not necessarily in this exact order, but around each of these sites to make the journey narrative work. If you think back to like Greek myths, this is how Greek myths work. Like Ulysses, or that's a bad example. It doesn't matter what example I use. The hero, you know, they're approaching something, an island with sirens. They establish conflict at the island. They overcome the conflict. They leave changed. Right. The sirens shake the snow globe, and now they have to like renorm into new people. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. How do you feel about these scenes so far?
Good. Yeah, that's a lot more structure than I had before.
Okay. So let's talk about your initial scenes that you may want to write. Um, Liz and Sawyer's relationship. Um, uh, Shown, demonstrated is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Uh, Liz and Dad's relationship demonstrated. So we want to lay out all of the relationships. Liz and Tiffany. We need the world before. You need Liz at work, and you need Liz and Dean. So you've got kind of 5 scenes in world before.
Mm-hmm.
You can do them in any order you want. This, like, Liz and Tiffany's relationship does not have to be a conversation with Liz and Tiffany.
Mm-hmm.
You can show Sawyer running out of the house to go see Tiffany. You can show Sawyer and Tiffany coming home. You can show, Liz talking to Dean about Tiffany, right? Like, but we need a scene that establishes this is how Liz feels about Tiffany. If we're just doing Liz as your pro tag, then when we think about this chart, this is what,
Yeah.
like, Liz thinks Liz is, Liz thinks Sawyer is, Liz thinks Philip is, Liz thinks Tiffany is, Liz learns Liz is. These are the kind of like moments of, you can see you've got these 4 moments of change
Mm-hmm.
here. Um, you've got these 4 moments of change where Liz learns Liz is actually this. Liz learns Sawyer's actually this. Liz learns Philip is actually this. Liz learns Tiffany is actually this. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So coming into, and you've kind of got those here, right? Where Liz is going to have a conflict with each one of these, and you've got the kind of conflicts
Mm-hmm.
already laid out. You might add one if you decide to go with the flighty Tiffany. You might add one where it's like, Liz tells Tiffany, get a life, right? That kind of like, you know, Liz has to look at Tiffany and be like, "You're so talented, but you're running away from everything." Does that make sense?
Yep.
It'll be nice if you can make this at the end, because then what Liz learns about herself, she's actually using to teach Tiffany. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Then you get the nice mentoring in there of like, hey, the world's not going to be how you want it to be, but it doesn't have to, like, that's okay. It's okay that the world isn't how you want it to be. Um, yeah, so you've got these, but we need to set up all of these stories in the world before so that we can get to, like, you got to show me Liz at work so that when she has her moment of realization of I'm never going to be promoted, it actually matters to us. Does that make sense? You have
Mhm.
to show me Liz and her relationship with her dad. Um, Tiffany, where did I put Liz and dad? Oh, there it is.
Oh, over
You have
there.
to show me Liz and her relationship with her dad so that when she learns her dad is dying, I care. Does that make sense?
We're gonna have to move him that further back then in the story because she doesn't really have much of a relationship with him at the beginning.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. These aren't in order. They can go anywhere
Yeah.
you want. I would actually, so Faye, what I would do is I would try to write
Okay.
these five first to ground yourself in the voices. You may not keep all of them. And I might try to write two for each. And in your end product, you may not keep all of them, but it's going to ground you in all four characters' voices. And then um this is your big first scene where she has a realization that nothing's ever going to happen. Right. And play with these. The reason I say you might write two for each is like this, you might write a conversation. You might write Liz encountering Tiffany, and then you might write a conversation with Liz and Tiffany's mom. And then you might write a conversation with Liz and Mona. Right. Like, same
Hmm.
with Dean. Like, you might write a conversation with Liz and Dean where Liz is coming home from work and like Dean seems distracted and a little out of it, and or Dean is pushing Liz to get Sawyer's college stuff turned in, right? Like,
Hmm.
you could have, there's a couple different ways. I would write a couple of them just to give yourself space to kind of pick which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to toss.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We've been going for about an hour. How are you feeling?
Yeah. Okay. I'm feeling more like I've got a bit of a direction, which is good, but
Okay. You feeling motivated to write?
sure. Yes. Yes.
Are you just telling me that so I'll get off the phone with you?
No, no, I'm gonna read.
You say that to make me stop, Faye? Um, yeah. And don't allow the journey to overwhelm you.
Yeah.
Start off writing the world before, write them as troubled problem people,
Hmm.
and then start writing scenes that excite you, things
Okay.
that make you pumped. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The journey will, once you get to the journey part, the writing is going to be super easy because it's going to start to fall into a rhythm. Every site, you're going to have this rhythm around it. So the journey is going to be easy for you. It's the stuff before the journey that's going to be tough. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
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 All right. Anything else we need to talk about?
No. No. Thank you for helping me invent Tiffany.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me a fourth character to deal with. You're welcome. I'm gonna hit stop and we can chat a little bit more.
Okay.